This is the Beats Working Show. We're on a mission to redeem work, the word, the place, and the way. I'm your host, Mark Wright. Join us because getting paid to practice beats working to get paid. What's the key to managing young workers in America today? Because I think some people are lamenting Gen Z. I think a lot of people would say that this generation is asserting themselves in a way that we should have when we were in our 20s. But I'd love to know, just from a practical standpoint, what's the key to managing young workers in America today?
So I think a lot of it is about authenticity. I think it's reminding the young people, certainly the people I work with, I try to remind them of the fact that they have a job to do. This isn't a place where they can come and sort of pick and choose what they want to do. They actually are going to be held accountable for something, and they're part of that story, and that's what they're being paid for. And so it's coaching, it's being available to answer questions, it's helping them understand why decisions are made in the way that they're made. It's enabling them to own, and doing so in a way that I think will allow them to aspire to the mission in the first place. So a lot of them are driven by the mission. What I will say about Gen Z, I'm a lot more hopeful about Gen Z than I think a lot of people are. I think they have a consciousness around entrepreneurship, instinctive entrepreneurship, which may surprise us, 15, 20 years down the road. They see the world in a different way. They've sort of grown up. I look at my son, for example. He grew up when the Great Recession happened, and he saw how my wife and I had to deal with the circumstances around that. He's seen the pandemic and had to kind of live through that with his college and the resilience that's required there. They've seen the conflict opening up again in the world, if you look around. And to some degree, there's some sort of woolly-headed thinking going on around the conflicts as well. The simple truth is that there's some bad people in the world who are orchestrating a massive conflict, and we're getting distracted by things that don't really matter. And so we have to try and figure out how to help people see the bigger picture. That historical context is really important. Gen Z, I think, get it as a whole. Yes, we see a lot of youngsters who are using TikTok and using the mobile platforms, and they can use that effectively and well. And they've grown up in a world where that is the platform. When I grew up, it was the telephone, and everything on technology is sort of tied to that telephone experience. And they only know the mobile apps. And I look at my son when he does things with his phone, I'm going, it wasn't designed for that, but you're doing it. That's kind of cool. But it's that creativity that will come through in the long run. And maybe these inflection points, like the Great Recession, like the pandemic, like the conflict that's emerging in the world, these are things that are going to make them more resilient, and actually, I think, in time, become people that we can be proud of. And you and I are Gen Xers. We had our tough times as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. We had a recession as soon as I was in the UK at the time. So in 83, we had a recession because we had to fix inflation. And inflation back in the UK, back in those days, and I know it was high here as well, but we was running at 16, 17%. And so I like to sort of, and this is where I have a conversation with Gen Z, and they say, oh, it's running at 6, 7%. I go, actually, that's kind of normal for interest rates. 16, 17% is when it's really bad news. And then you have, not only do we have all the shocks, we had conflict throughout the 80s. We had the Cold War coming to its zenith. If you listen to the music, most of it is related to the underlying fear of the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the US. Mm-hmm. And then when we broke out of that, we had a moment of sort of wonderful opportunity with the 90s, and where everything's sort of like the peace dividend, which, arguably in the historical context, we squandered.
And let's face it, grunge was invented in the 90s.
It was. There's a whole bunch of things that we lived through, which this generation is also going to live through, and I think they will come through it fine. I think I look at the majority of them. I ignore the voices on the edges, because, to be honest with you, when you look at social media, people forget it's like 20% that are doing the talking. There's a whole bunch of people underneath there, 80%, who are getting frustrated and tired with some of the extreme expressions that are coming out. And it's that 80% that I have faith in.
Well, as we start to wrap things up, Kai, one of the values that we hold as a company, our founder, Dan Rogers, believes that getting paid to practice beats working to get paid. And I think we've covered, and really the idea is that work should make us better in all parts of our life, including who we are at home. And it shouldn't just be a transaction of trading time for money. And I think that we've talked about the difference between, some of the big tech companies and some of the startups. And there's a lot of gray area. I'd love your thoughts, Kai, on that concept of getting paid to practice, getting paid to develop as a human being in a way that makes us better globally, right?
So I think part of that is also how you express yourself in terms of service to the community. When I think about it, you and I are both Rotarians, so hopefully I haven't let a secret out of the bag there. But one of the problems with Rotarians is we don't tell anybody that we're Rotarians. We just get on with the job of serving the community. What's wonderful about being paid to practice is that we're learning lots of skills in our work, which we can actually take out and apply to the community. And this is where the Rotary story for me is really important. It's about service above self. It's about how do we help change the community to a better place? How do we make changes where we can leave the community better than we found it? And Rotary's story is all these business people coming together in service and really having an impact and talking about it at work. I try to bring employees into club meetings. I try to help them understand that there are ways to give back. You're in a situation where you're being paid well. You've got you're probably sitting there saying, well, what's the meaning of life? Where can I make a difference? I'm showing up 9 to 5, but I really don't know if I'm making a difference. The service side is where I'd like to encourage people to start to explore. Give back to your community. Look for the opportunities within your community where you can make a difference thanks to the situation you're in today. My avenue is Rotary, and I've had a wonderful journey through that organization where we've organized, we do the 5K run in Bellevue, for example, for the last 17 years, which is the big running event. We organize that. It's like a business, but all of us are giving our time for free. And then the money that comes back, we reinvest back in the community to support things like kindering, which is sort of focusing on autism, but really sort of healthy lives for our kids and families. And I know that there's lots of Rotary clubs that are doing that, where they're tapping into that vocational legacy and bringing people in to support their community. And so when you go back to that phrase, beats working, I think, you're getting paid to practice, take that practice and beat working by actually giving back in some other way. And the rewards from that, the feeling of community engagement and satisfaction from making a difference, perhaps the best rewards anybody could have.
And I'm glad that you brought up Rotary. I completely forgot to bring up the topic. Kai, you are the district governor for District 5030, so about 50 clubs in the Seattle area. And you've done a fantastic job of leading us over the past year, and your term is coming up to its end. But I feel like your leadership in Rotary is a full circle moment. A lot of people don't know that polio is almost gone in the world because Rotarians decided to roll up their sleeves starting in the late 70s and deliver polio vaccine all over the world. And didn't your mother have polio?
Yeah, my mother's a polio survivor. Yeah, absolutely. And she's now, and this is one of the reasons why I say to people, we can't go to sleep on polio. The virus is a vicious little virus, and it will look for any weakness in our program to lock it down and prevent it from escaping and creating the turmoil that it used to do back 50 years ago. And the polio is, to me, is personal. My mom now is in her 80s, and she's now got what's called post-polio syndrome, which is where essentially it comes back as you age and your muscles degenerate. But she was able to overcome the disease, was able to walk and live a normal life, apart from the fact she also got malaria. So she's got, the two big diseases that you can unfortunately get. And so she's a strong lady. I admire her resilience and her fortitude in terms of what she's had to deal with because of that disease. And I don't want to see that on kids in the future. And so Rotary, that for me, that was a calling of making a real difference to prevent that disease from, ultimately coming back. And we're down to 2 countries now, Pakistan and Afghanistan. And the great thing about Pakistan and Afghanistan is that everyone's committed to try to eradicate it as well. So they've actually got the communities, and it's only because of Rotarians being on the ground, having those personal relationships, that made the difference. And those Rotarians, in some cases in Pakistan, have been killed because of advocating to sort of end polio. When you think about the sacrifices to actually help make a better life for your community could also result in the end of your life, it's shocking to many people, but that's the reality of Rotary on the ground. We will make those kinds of sacrifices to ultimately make our communities better. And if that means ending polio in some of the more hostile environments, then we will do that.
Kai, before we wrap up, I have to ask you about AI and quantum computing. I feel like a lot of people are saying this is like the Gutenberg press being invented all over again. Is there any way to give us an idea of what this is going to do to change the world, these two inventions?
Yeah, I mean, it's wow. If we can get quantum compute going in a realistic way, the cost associated with compute power is going to drop dramatically. That in itself is going to be transformative for AI. Now, when you think about AI, I try to simplify it for people. AI is essentially working with large data sets, so data at scale, and using statistical models to identify patterns, and then using that to give you some predictive insights. That's AI. And I know a lot of people are sort of talking about it being sapient, et cetera, et cetera. Look, no, it's not. Yes, there are some things that happen in the models that we don't quite understand, but it's not because the machine has decided to start thinking for itself. It's because there's a discrepancy in our understanding of the math. And the transformation it's going to do, look, if I think we've hit the low-hanging fruit. There's some bottlenecks that we have to now address. One of them is compute power. The other one is transparency in our models and the quality of data. And acquiring that quality of data is going to be exponentially even more expensive than what we've got today. And then you've got the last mile challenge, right? Which is, how does it impact people at work? How do they adopt it? How do they take advantage of it? And there's some wonderful things that we're doing today, which kind of give you an indication of where we can go with regards to improving our ability to do meaningful work. So instead of being, tied down with some of the mundane work that we have to do in terms of writing text, stuff like that, we can actually put our minds to thinking about bigger problems and let the mundane work be taken care of. I think that's where the opportunity lies. And then there's the automation that can come from it. If you look at Tesla, everyone thinks it's a car company. Actually, it's a data company. And all the data it's capturing and learning, the car's like is the tool to enable that. And it's going to give us all sorts of different insights in terms of driving patterns, how we can improve our roadways, how do we take advantage of some of the behaviors that we have on the roads, things like that. There's all sorts of incredible things that are going to come out of our ability to interpret, read data, and make some insights on that. But we're a long way from it. We still have to solve some of the bottleneck issues that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Kaj Pedersen, thank you so much for taking time to join us on Beats Working and sharing your wisdom. Continued success, my friend, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for your time as well, Mark. It's been a pleasure.